What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Southern Sorcery. Today we are doing an extreme budget build of Edgar Markov with his recent reprint in the remastered set from Innistrad. His value is continuing to come down. I think there are some variants that are getting close to like 35 bucks. So I would say we'll hopefully see him drop a little bit more. But either way, 35 bucks is a steal given that he was over $100 before his reprint was announced. So long overdue reprint for this guy. He's insanely powerful in the command zone or on the battlefield. The Eminence ability is ridiculous. Probably never should have been made, but here we are, and it's for you to take advantage of. So if you guys don't care, please help us out and like this video. Go ahead and drop a comment, and then be sure you are subscribed. We're getting super close to 5,000. So go ahead and knock a few more numbers off of this for us. Because when we get to 5,000, we're going to do what we always do when we hit a major milestone, and that is have a massive giveaway celebration. We'll give away precons, we'll give away boxes, we're going to give away singles, we're going to give away accessories, playmats, deck boxes, awesome nerd gear stuff, playmat storage, all kinds of incredible giveaways once we hit that 5K mark, which we are actually rapidly closing in on. Thank you so much. January has already been crazy. We've gotten over 400 new subs this month, which is an amazing growth for us. So thank you so much, and consider subscribing if you enjoy this kind of content. So with no further ado, of course, again, Edgar Markov, the vampire godfather, if you will. He has Eminence, and whenever you cast a vampire spell, make a 1/1 black vampire creature token. That is his Eminence ability. That happens whether he's in the command zone or on the battlefield, which is wild. Then he also has first strike and haste. So when you do cast him, he's going to have haste, which is nice. And whenever he attacks, put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. So that includes himself. So the very first turn you get him out, you can go ahead and do this, buff up all of those vampires that he's been making before you cast him. Just amazing value, incredible value. So in these extreme budget builds, we actually don't include the cost of the commander card in the cost of the deck. We just assume that you've either pulled one of these or, you know, whatever the case might be, but we don't apply that towards the actual like cost of the budget for the deck. The commander is kind of what it is. We also don't include basic lands, but the cost for this deck before removing Edgar Markov was $79, and his cost is $38.50, which leaves us with 50 cents worth of lands to get us under $40. So that's literally going to be like right at $40 to build this out outside of basic lands. And chances are you guys are probably going to have some of these cards laying around in your bulk, in your collection. Some of these lands you can rob them maybe from some other decks that you're not playing anymore, so you're probably going to be able to build this out for a lot less than 40 bucks. But this is our $40 destroy your enemies budget build for Edgar. We'll just go ahead and run down the bulk of this deck, which is going to be creatures. So first up, we've got Abzan Falconer. Abzan Falconer is a human, one of the very few creatures in this deck that is not a vampire. It is 2 and a white, and it has Outlast, so you can pay 1 at sorcery speed and put a 1/1 counter on Abzan Falconer. But then each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it has flying. So when Edgar comes in and attacks and buffs our whole team, everyone has a 1/1 counter. All our vampires get a 1/1 counter, and so now they all have flying. Notably and weirdly, a lot of vampires don't have flying, and the tokens that get made don't have flying either. So this is a good way for us to pay off a huge wide board full of creatures. You've got, you know, 15 1/1s. Now they all have flying, and you can get some serious damage in with that. Next, we've got Baron Bertram Greywater. This is a vampire noble. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, make a 1/1 vampire creature with lifelink. This ability triggers only once each turn. So he's going to see the token that Edgar makes and make another one once a turn, which is great. Next, we've got Blood Artist. This is a classic vampire, 1 and a black. When this creature or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is really nice for board wipes. If you've got a big board stake going on, you've got Blood Artist out, someone does wipe the board and you lose 15 vampires. Well, that's okay, because we'll gain 15 life and deal 15 damage. So Blood Artist is very good. We also have Blood Seeker, 1 and a black for a creature, and it says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your opponent's control, you may have that player lose 1 life. So now we're punishing our opponents for playing creatures, which is good. We also have Champion of Dusk. This one is really good. It's 3 black for a vampire. When it enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the number of vampires you control. So a whole bunch of cards getting drawn all at one time. We also have Clavelino, First of the Blessed. 1 white. It says whenever you attack, target attacking vampire that isn't a demon becomes a demon in addition to its other types. It gains, when this creature dies, draw a card and create a tapped 4/3 white and black vampire demon creature token with flying. As you go to combat, you can choose another vampire and it gains all of that text. So basically, it becomes a demon in addition to being whatever other kind of creature that it already is, most likely be a vampire. And so then whenever it dies, again, we're fine with stuff dying, like with a Blood Artist trigger. So here's another payoff for stuff dying. You send it to the graveyard, but then you make a 4/3 token vampire demon with flying. So you get a big flyer out of losing the original creature, which is great. And it can be any of those tokens that Edgar is making, because it doesn't specify that it has to be, token or non-token. So really fun, very good. Next we have Cordial Vampire. It is 2 black. It says whenever a Cordial Vampire or another vampire dies, put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. This can get out of control if you have a sack outlet, or if you're swinging out wide and you have several creatures that are dying, those 1/1s. Anytime those 1/1s die, you're going to put 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. So if you lose 3, all of your other creatures get 3 +1/+1 counters. So Cordial Vampire can do some serious work. We've also got Cruel Celebrant. It's 1 white and 1 black. Whenever it or another creature or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. Then we've got Drana, Liberator of Malakar. 1 black has flying and first strike. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on each attacking creature you control. So you can see here how the theme is go wide, make those things huge, swing in for tons of damage. We've also got Dusk Legion Duelist. It's 1 and a white and has vigilance. Whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on Dusk Legion Duelist, draw a card. This triggers only once a turn. So we're going to probably be drawing an extra card every turn with all the 1/1 counters that we're going to be spreading around. Next, we have Dusk Legion Sergeant. It's 1 and a black for a vampire soldier, has menace. Then you can pay 1 and a black into it and sacrifice it. And then each non-token vampire creature you control gains persist until the end of turn. And persist is a mechanic that says if this creature dies and it has no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. So it's sort of it's a way to bring our stuff back after it dies, which is really good. Next, we have Dusk Legion Zealot. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. We also have Falcon Wrath Pit Fighter. It is 1 red, and you can pay 1 and a red into it to discard a card and sacrifice a vampire. Then you can draw 2 cards, but you can only activate this if an opponent lost life this turn. Not a fantastic vampire, but it only costs 1, so Edgar is going to see it and give you the token. So it's basically 2 vampires for 1 red mana, which is good. Next is Florian Voldaren Scion. This is a vampire noble, has first strike, and then at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, so your second main, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the total amount of life your opponents lost this turn, so potentially quite a bit. Exile 1 of those cards and put the rest on the bottom of your library. You can cast the exiled card this turn. So just card advantage, which is really good. Next we have High Society Hunter. This is 3 black. For a vampire noble with flying, it says when it attacks, you may sacrifice another creature, and if you do, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. Whenever another non-token creature dies, draw a card. So if you want to sack some of our other vampires, we can draw cards. Or just when another creature dies, we get to draw a card, which is great. Next, we have Indulgent Aristocrat. This is another 1-drop vampire. So again, 2 vampires for 1 mana is good. This one has lifelink, so also good. And then you can pay 2 and sacrifice a creature to put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. So again, that gives us a sack outlet, and it also lets us buff up the rest of our team. Then we have Insolent Neonate, another 1-drop, has menace, and it says discard a card, sacrifice Insolent Neonate to draw a card. So, if there's going to be a board wipe or something happens and you want to, or just anything and you're trying to dig for an answer, you can discard a card to go try to find something else and draw a card, which is always very good. Next we have Legion Lieutenant. This is white-black for a 2/2 vampire, and it says other vampires you control get +1/+1. So it's going to buff our team. Then we have Mavrin Fane, Dusk Apostle, is 2 and a white. Whenever 1 or more non-token vampires you control attack, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So more token generation. We also have another notably non-vampire. This is Morbid Opportunist, 2 and a black, and says whenever 1 or more other creatures die, draw a card. This triggers only once each turn. So that's going to be on your turn and on your opponent's turns. So any creature that dies, draw a card once a turn. Patron of the Vein is up next. It has flying. When it enters the battlefield, you can destroy a target creature an opponent controls. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it and put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. More of this buffing, putting counters on things. Then we have Rakish Air. This costs 2 and a red and says whenever a vampire you control deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on it. Then we have Ruthless Lawbringer, a vampire assassin. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice another creature. If you do, destroy a target non-land permanent. So good removal there. Next we have Sanctum Seeker. This is 2 black. This one can be a finisher. Whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. If you've got a big board of creatures and low life totals, you've got, 15, 16 creatures out, all you got to do is move to the attack. Each opponent is going to lose 15, 16 life, and you're going to gain 15, 16 life. This can absolutely, in a go-wide deck, be the finisher. Next, we have Shadow Alley Denizen. When another black creature enters a battlefield under your control, target creature gains Intimidate until the end of turn. Intimidate is a mechanic that says it can't be blocked except by artifact creatures or creatures that share a color type with it. So if you've got like a mono-colored vampire and you swing it at someone who doesn't have that color, it's essentially unblockable. Or if they don't have artifact creatures. Next, we've got Stromkirk Captain. This is 1 red/black for a vampire with first strike that gives other vampires you control +1/+1 and first strike. So also good. Then we have Vampire Gourmand. When this creature attacks, you can sacrifice another creature. If you do, draw a card, and this creature can't be blocked this turn. So unblockable and get to draw a card. Pretty good. Then we have Vampire Nighthawk. This one is one of the original bad boys, but this has flying, death touch, and lifelink. So a really good vampire. Then we have Vampire of the Dire Moon, another 1-drop. It has death touch and lifelink. That's good. We have Vampire Socialite for a red or a red and a black. Has menace, and when it enters the battlefield, if an opponent lost life this turn, put a 1/1 counter on each other vampire you control. As long as an opponent lost life this turn, each other vampire you control enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it. So she's going to put a bunch of counters on your existing, and then as you continue playing, new ones you play are going to come in with a bunch of counters on it. Then we have Vengeful Blood Witch. This is 1 and a black. It says whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So more death payoff. We also have Vicious Conquistador. This is another 1-drop, and it says whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 1 life. We also have Viscera Seer. This is also 1 black for a vampire, and it says sacrifice a creature and scry 1. This is a really good sacrifice outlet if we want to sacrifice creatures at instant speed. We also have Welcoming Vampire for 2 and a white. Has flying. Whenever 1 or more other creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, but is going to be a consistent card draw. Then our last creature is going to be Wisp Drinker Vampire. This is 2 white/black. For a vampire rogue that has flying, it says whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So that is potentially pretty big. We're going to be making tons of tokens. But then you can also pay into it 5, a black and a white, so a total of 7. So a little on the pricey side, but creatures you control with power 2 or less gain death touch and lifelink until the end of turn. So this can be a potential payoff if for some reason our vampires are not massive already from our counters. We can pay that into her, and then they all have death touch and lifelink. Take out a bunch of stuff if people want to block with the death touch, and we can just gain a whole bunch of life. All right, so next up we're going to look at sorceries. We only have a couple of those. First is Night's Whisper. It is you draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. We also have Olivia's Wrath, 4 and a black. For each non-vampire creature gets -X until the end of turn, where X is the number of vampires you control, so a very good one-sided board wipe. Next we've got Pact of the Serpent, a great card draw card. It is 1 and 2 black. Choose a creature type, and then target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of creatures they control of the chosen type. So draw a whole bunch of cards if you've got a whole bunch of vampires. I have seen this card used as a one-shot on an opponent if they are also running a typal deck and they have a big board state, say an elves player, and they've got 20, 30 elves. You can cast this and have them draw 30 cards and lose 30 life. So it can also be a one-shot kill on an opponent. So a little bit of versatility there, and a lot of people don't even think about using it that way. So I just thought I'd make a note of that there. We also have Painful Lesson. This is another card draw card. It is target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. Moving on from sorceries, we've got our instants, and so we've got first Chaos Warp, 2 and a red, and the owner of a target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library, and if it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. Chaos Warp is just good spot removal. because it targets any permanent. Next, we also have Corrupted Conviction for 1 black. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. So essentially, the cost is 1 black, sack a creature, draw 2 cards. Good card draw. And we also have Generous Gift. Again, targeted removal that removes any permanent, which is great. We also have Go for the Throat. This is another spot removal, destroy target non-artifact creature. So creature removal. We also have Path to Exile, which exiles a target creature, then its opponent looks for a basic land, puts it on the battlefield. We also have Plumb the Forbidden. This can draw us also a whole bunch of cards. It's 1 and a black, and then as an additional cost, essentially as a kicker, you can sacrifice 1 or more creatures. When you do, copy this spell for each creature sacrifice. This way you draw a card and lose a life. So you can sack a whole bunch of stuff if you want to, especially when we've got payoffs for creatures dying. So, we cast this, we sacrifice 5 creatures. We're going to be able to draw 6 cards. We're going to lose 5 life. No big deal. And then we're going to also probably gain life from, Blood Artist or draw cards off of something else. So this is potentially really, really good when you kind of start piling on the effects. Next, we have Swords to Plowshares. It's very similar to Path to Exile. Exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. Then we also have some protection here. We've got Unbreakable Formation. This is 2 and a white. Creatures you control gain indestructible until the end of turn. If you are to cast this, though, in your main phase, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures, and they gain Vigilance until the end of turn. So if you want to do a big swing towards the end of the game, you can cast this in your main phase, buff everything up, give them Vigilance so you have blockers on the crackback, which can be really nice. We also have got Village Rites. This is 1 black. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature and draw 2 cards. That one is just at instant speed, which is great. Moving on from that, we have some artifacts. We've got some mana rocks. We've got Arcane Signet. We've got Chromatic Lantern, which notably also mana fixes your lands for you, which is good. And we also have Felwar Stone, Orzhov Signet, Rakdos Signet, Soul Ring, Talisman of Conviction, and then we also, while it is not a mana rock, it is ramp. We've got Wayfarer's Bauble here. What is a budget deck without Wayfarer's Bauble? And then outside of the mana rocks, we also have got Idol of Oblivion. Costs 2, and then you can tap it to draw a card. Activate this only if you created a token this turn. That's going to be almost every turn. And then we also have Wedding Invitation, which of course is on theme for a vampire deck. When Wedding Invitation enters the battlefield, draw a card, and then you can tap it and sacrifice it. And a target creature can't be blocked this turn, and if it's a vampire, it also gains lifelink until the end of turn. And next, we have just a few enchantments here. First, we've got Intangible Virtue, which gives creature tokens we control +1/+1 and Vigilance, which is good. We've also got Phyrexian Arena, which costs 1 and 2 black for an enchantment that at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose a life. And we also have Vampiric Rites. This is 1 black, and then you pay 1 and a black to sacrifice a creature to gain a life and draw a card. And then we also have Wedding Announcement. So we got the announcement and the invitation. At the beginning of your end step, put an invitation counter on this enchantment. If you attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn, draw a card. Otherwise, create a 1/1 white human creature token, and then if this enchantment has 3 or more invitation counters on it, you're going to transform it. And when you transform it, it turns into Wedding Festivity, and it just says creatures you control get +1/+1. So we're going to either make some tokens or draw some cards, and then we're going to get to buff our team. And then from there, we move on to our lands. We're not going to run down the lands. I'm just going to tell you about the lands quickly. We have got budget versions of dual lands. We've got, lands that come in untapped as long as they meet the certain criteria or conditions. And then we also have a few utility lands that can do a few things for you. Vault of the Archangel, some Voldaren Estate, a few things along those lines. Windbrisk Heights, some hideaway lands. Just a couple of cool lands there. But mostly we're just trying to get our mana fixing, and we're doing that on a budget as well. So this deck falls well into that budget area. However, it is still really strong. So we're just going to walk through the tiniest little bit of some live gameplay for you guys just on Moxfield. All right, again, there's no substitution for actual interaction and playing against players, but we're just going to Goldfish it real quick just so you guys can see kind of how fast this thing can get out of control. And so first up, we're on turn 1, so we'll go ahead and draw a card. Let's go ahead and go do Path of Ancestry. Since we don't have a turn 1 play, it does enter tapped. We'll go ahead and move on to turn 2. Turn 2, we can play a Plains for turn, and here we can either go ahead and ramp with Felwar Stone, or we can go ahead and get a creature out. We have a bunch of 2-drops and 1 3-drop, so let's just go ahead and get a creature out, because we're gonna get 2 creatures out. So we'll cast the Dusk Legion Surgeon. Then we'll go ahead and add the vampire token here that our commander makes. We'll move him over here, just out of the way. And then we'll go ahead and tap our lands, of course. And then we'll move to the next turn. So this turn, let's go ahead and get another source of black out here. Since we control plains, it comes in untapped. Let's go ahead and tap 2. And then we'll go ahead and cast our Felwar Stone, which is going to leave us 2 to go ahead and tap for another vampire. And then that's going to make another vampire token. All right, so turn 3, and we have 4 creatures out. We can also swing out and attack with these. This one here has menace, so we're going to assume that on turn 3, someone is not going to be able to block this guy. And more than likely, we'll probably be able to swing out with this other token if we wanted to. And then from there, let's go ahead and move on to our next turn. Next turn, we've got Voldaren Estate or a Plains. We can go ahead and play the Voldaren Estate. We don't really care too much about, but let's go ahead and cast Night's Whisper for 1 and a black. So we'll just go 1 black, and we're going to draw 2 cards. That's looking better. So let's tap 2 for Arcane Signet, and then with Arcane Signet and Felwar Stone, we're just going to go ahead and cast the Vengeful Blood Witch and make another token. So now we have some death payoffs here with Vengeful Blood Witch. When this or another creature I control dies, target opponent loses a life and you gain 1 life. And then this one says, whenever this creature attacks, I can sacrifice another creature, and if I do, draw a card, and this creature can't be blocked this turn. So again, we've got a menace here, so we can go ahead and swing with him. We're going to assume that an opponent doesn't have 2 blockers. We can go ahead and swing with the Vampire Gourmand, and then let's sacrifice one of the tokens here, which means we're going to draw a card. This Vampire Gourmand can't be blocked this turn now. And then with Vengeful Blood Witch, target opponent loses a life and we'll gain a life. So we'll gain a life, which actually we needed to lose 2 from that Night's Whisper anyway. And so now we're swinging out with that. And we can swing out, say we sacrificed the vampire token that had Summoning Sickness, so we can swing out with some more stuff. So this deck is very aggro. You can see already what it's kind of starting to want to do. We'll move to our next turn. Man, we've got Plumb the Forbidden already. Okay, that's a good one here. So let's go Smoldering Marsh. No, it'll enter tap because we don't have 2 or more basic lands. So we'll put the plains back out. Let's go ahead and cast Cruel Celebrant. Sorry, these are up here and out of control for some reason. Looking a little haggard. When it or another creature or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So it does the same thing Vengeful Blood Witch does. So they have the same trigger. So we'll keep those kind of over here together. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana. So from here we can either cast Edgar, or we can go ahead and just cast the Draina Liberator of Malakar, which will start to buff up our team as well. Or we could cast the Plumb the Forbidden and draw a bunch more cards. We'll make another vampire off of the Cruel Celebrant. I'm going to go ahead and say we cast the Liberator, which is going to make another vampire. And then we're going to cast the Plumb the Forbidden. So we'll go black, 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 and white. And then we'll cast this for 1 and a black. As an additional cost, let's go ahead and sacrifice 3 of our vampire tokens, which means we're going to lose 3 life from the Plumb the Forbidden. Come on. There we go. But we're also going to draw 4 cards. And then Vengeful Blood Witch and Cruel Celebrant are both going to trigger. So then instead of losing 3 life, we're actually going to now gain 6 life. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, going up to 42. And then now let's look at what we drew. We got Dusk Legion Duelist. Yeah, I mean, we got 2 mana left. Let's go ahead and cast the Dusk Legion. So now whenever a 1/1 counter gets put on Dusk Legion, we'll draw a card. So then on the next turn, we'll go ahead and let's make another vampire token. We'll go ahead and cast our commander next turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lands. Okay, move to the next turn. A mountain for turn. Let's go ahead and get out Edgar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Edgar comes out. We are still holding up some mana here, but we're going to go ahead and go to combat. Whenever he attacks, put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. So he has haste and first strike. So we'll be able to swing him at somebody. You can also swing out some of these other things if we want to. Everything is going to get a +1/+1 counter. But now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vampires out. They're all going to get +1/+1 counters put on them. That's going to trigger the Dusk Legion Duelist, so we're going to draw a card. Okay, so on our next turn, we could cast Olivia's Wrath. giving each non-vampire -X until the end of turn. Where X is the number of vampires you control. So that's going to be our turn 7. We'll move to turn 7. We'll go ahead and go Welcoming Vampire, giving us more tokens. That was 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's keep that red. Go white. And then we also want to go ahead and do Olivia's Wrath. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for Olivia's Wrath. Each non-vampire creature is going to get -11. That should clear the board out for us to be able to go ahead and probably finish somebody off here. Probably isn't going to win us the game outright, but it's going to be close. And then, you know, we can also sacrifice some stuff because we've got the Blood Witch and the Cruel Celebrant over here. We also have for next turn some stuff to do. So even now on a budget, you can see how strong Edgar is and how strong Vampire Tribal is, but especially at like a lower powered table, a lower power pod, this is going to be really, really good and really, really hard to slow down. The other thing is again, even with a board wipe right now, we kind of are okay with that. Like if someone were to board wipe us, we're going to lose everything. But we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We've got 11 creatures. That's going to trigger Vengeful Blood Witch and Cruel Celebrant, so we're going to gain 22 life. We're fine with that. We're also going to deal 22 damage, 11 to one and 11 to another, or to the same. So we've got 22 damage, probably to the person who cast the board wipe. We've got 22 damage on board that we can deal out. So even if that were to happen, let's just say it does happen, everything just dies and goes to the graveyard. You know, we'll move to the next turn. We've got plenty of mana. We can start casting more vampires. Whenever Patron of the Vein enters, destroy target creature and opponent controls. If there's anything left, now we can destroy something. And guess what? Edgar's going to trigger, and we're going to make another vampire again. So, like, it just doesn't take us very long to rebuild. That's why sacrificing stuff is fine. That's why swinging out with almost a reckless abandon, with no care for whether the creatures that we're swinging with die or not, we're fine with that because we can just recast all this stuff. We can rebuild pretty quickly. The only thing that you really need to have is card draw. But again, even with just these two here on board, and next turn, you know, we're gonna have something to do. We're gonna recast Edgar here. So we're going to have, and then we're going to start buffing things up again. So we'll have two 5/5s and a 2/2 the turn after a board wipe. So, you know, it's very, very, very good. So I hope you guys have fun with this $40 deck tech and have a great time destroying all of your friends and your enemies. Again, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a bunch. Like this video and go ahead and drop us a comment. What other budget ads would you suggest that we put in? What's in it that you think is not belong in it? Just give us your thoughts and your feedback. Trolls are also welcome. We love it. But just, you know what? Make it a good troll comment. Don't just be like, you're dumb. I mean, or do. Either way, it's fine with me. I respond to the clever trolls. I just leave the other stuff alone. But anyway, we hope you guys have an awesome night, and we hope this helped you out. And we will see you in the next one. Bye!